I'm Greg, welcome to Affect Studio. I'm here to talk about spring reverb and more specifically to show you how I use the Kemper's ability to reference two sounds to match the built-in model of the spring reverb in the Kemper to the actual spring reverb you're hearing from my amp. What you heard at the start was me playing through my deluxe reverb style amp. This is one I put together about 13 years ago and has been used countless times in the studio. I have a lot of regular clients who just absolutely love that amp. And I spent quite a lot of time fine-tuning the reverb when I made it to get it to sit with the amp and not sort of stick out like a lot of them do. Obviously sometimes you want that sound. If you're doing your surf music and things, you're going to want a lot more reverb and a lot more obvious, if you're going for the traditional Dick Dale type, surf sound. But for just general playing, I wanted it to sit more with the amp, add a bit of body, bit of air, without sort of sticking out as being an obvious effect. Once again, I'm using the Kemper as the design of the unit. The architecture allows me to very quickly flip between the reference amp out in the studio with the reverb back on and the profile I've made of that amp, and add the reverb model to my profile, and then flip between them as you do when you're setting up the profile, except you're not profiling, you're just actually adjusting the reverb till you get them as close as you can. And as you'll see, there's a lot of parameters within the reverb that you can use to really fine tune it and tweak it to get it sounding the way you want it to. You can do a similar thing with the quad Cortex, although it actually seems a bit pointless in some ways, in that once you've done it, you can't save that as a permanent preset that you can always access. So if you're on a model and you go, okay, I want to use that deluxe reverb, I can just select it and it's available. You can of course save it as part of the rig you're working on, but it means, for example, here where I'm making captures of the amp at different levels with different EQ settings, that I have to go in and actually change those parameters every single time I made that a new rig to get it to match. So spring reverb. This here is a reverb tank or reverb pan. The springs are literal. That's what gives you your reverb, and when you bump your Fender amp hard, and you hear that doing, that's what's doing it. The spring reverb was invented in the 1930s by Lorenz Hammond, who of course invented the Hammond organ amongst many other things, and the number of patents under his name is apparently just absolutely staggering. His first invention, I understand, were those 3D glasses, the cardboard 3D glasses with the blue and red cellophane, not lens, but plastic over the eyes. He did that while he was a kid at school. I believe at the age of 14, he actually invented an automatic transmission, which I believe worked for a car. And went on. Obviously, the Hammond is the thing that, as musicians, we know and love. And although he never liked the Leslie cabinet, and I wonder if that's because he didn't invent it. I have no idea. Any amp with an actual reverb tank or pan, whatever you want to call it, has a second amplifier which vibrates the springs. In the same way that the main output drives the speaker in response to whatever you're playing on your instrument, the reverb driver vibrates the springs in response to that. But whereas the speaker is designed to be responsive and quick to mimic what you're doing, the springs, of course, obviously are sluggish, far from responsive, which of course is what gives us the reverb. So I don't know if you can see this. If I move with it, it might focus on it as well as me. There's a little yellow transducer on this one, with the second one down here. And that vibrates the springs, excites the springs in response to what's coming in, and the second transducer then picks it up to be sent back to the amplifier and to be mixed in with the main signal, and that's how we get our spring reverb. So when I first got the Kemper, I noticed that very few people were using the spring reverb as part of their profiles, even when it was a Fender type amp, like a vintage Fender amp, where the spring reverb is an integral part of that tone and the whole thing of the amp. And of course, that's not necessarily a bad thing, in that you don't have to stick with what's always been done. Use the amp as a starting point and take it somewhere else. And of course, there were some brilliant reverbs in there, which allowed you to do some soundscape sort of stuff that you can never do with like a spring reverb, or wouldn't want to anyway. But of course, the spring reverb is not a natural sound; it's a genuine effect, in its own right. But I also noticed when people were using the spring reverb that they generally didn't seem to have made any adjustments to it. It was just the stock standard Fender style preset. So anyway, here is the sound of my amp that I've profiled. Same sound that's in the Quad Cortex and the Kemper. So obviously no reverb because you can't profile that. So this now is the amp in the room, exact same setting, mics, same positions, everything exactly the same as the profile, except that the reverb's been put on the amp. So let's see if we can match the Kemper's spring reverb model to that. Okay, so here is the standard, they call it spring fan, which is their Fender default preset. Okay, now back to mine. Now, if once again you're wondering why I'm looking at my feet, it's because I'm using the profile remote, and by pressing two buttons I can switch off the reverb on the profiler and flip between the reference and the profile. My feet still aren't that exciting. So that's mine. This is back to the Kemper. So a completely different sound. Actually reminds me a lot of my first amp with reverb, which was a late 70s Fender Twin, one of those ones with the 135 watt ultra linear output transformer, and it was quite bright, and the reverb was quite pingy and not very bad, but wasn't ever my favourite sound. And obviously a lot of people like that, and the twin reverb is sort of a benchmark for reverb, so I can see why they've modelled that. So I'd say they've actually done a pretty good job in matching that, but it's not what I want in this instance. I want the reverb to sit in with the sound more and be less of an effect and more of a, adding ambience and body to the sound. Back to mine. So it's a lot darker and less, obvious. So first thing I'm going to notice is that the position here, they've got it set to post. Now, in a studio situation where you've recorded and you're adding reverb in a mix, the reverb will be post, position, like the amp's been recorded or anything else, drums, whatever, and then the reverb is added on. But of course, spring reverb in an amp comes before, so before the output valves, the output stage, and the speaker, so it actually gets filtered through the amp itself. And at this point here, where it's fairly clean, it's probably not going to make much difference to the way we hear it, but as you get some higher gain levels, it's going to actually sit in more as they compress with the distortion, and it's going to change the sound. Anyway, so let's try it. At the moment it's post. Let's try it pre. Okay, so it's different. It's a bit louder for a start. Now, first of all, I'm going to turn down mix here so we've got less volume. Okay, back to mine. All right, now I'm hearing this dripstone thing, which is their that pingy, sizzly thing at the top. I'm going to turn that down. Now back to mine. Back to Kemper. It's actually having it all the way down is closer to what I have. Spectral Balance is just the overall tone of the thing. Mine's still darker. I reckon this high decay, we need less that ringing for less time. maybe also, well, that's actually at 33k. Speakers filter off at about 5k or even less, 3k. Sorry, that's Kemper, back to mine. Kemper. So that's pretty close. Now I think Dwell actually drives the virtual reverb tank harder. The very first Fender Spring Reverb was a standalone model in the early 60s, which they later incorporated a simplified version into the amp. It had a Dwell control, which I think actually drove the pan, the spring, harder, and actually basically introduced a bit of distortion, which is very unusual for Leo Fender, who like things clean. That's Dwell. Let's turn that off. Turn it way up. What's it? Okay, it's not quite doing what I thought it was. I thought it was going to have more sort of low mids. Yeah, anyway, maybe it's a bit more of that. Anyway, so back to the Kemper. Might have gone slightly too far now with the high-end decay. I think the reverb time may be a smidge longer on that one. Back to mine. So there we have it. That's pretty close, and of course I can still fine tune that a little more if I want, but I'm pretty happy with that. And of course you don't have to A/B them like I've done here, but I like references, and knowing that reverb works well. It's been used, as I say, recorded numerous times. Okay, so once we're happy with our reverb, we want to save the effect module. So we go in here, hold down the reverb button, and then hit store, and gives you the option of reverb module or entire rig. And we just want the module so we can use that for future use with any other profile, any other setup, any other rig. So that's their default name right there. This is one of the few bits you can't rename as far as I'm aware in Rig Manager. I haven't worked out how to do that. If you can, someone please tell me. You have to go in and use the the controls here. Save that, and you're done. So that's it. That's how I use the Kemper to match the reverb on my different amps, because each reverb sounds a little different, or a lot different in some cases. Obviously you don't have to do any of this. You can just tweak the controls. You've heard what they do, and hopefully it's empowered you to get in there and mess with it till it sounds the way you want it to sound. If you stuff it up, remove the model and then start again. So hopefully this has been informative and helpful, entertaining, thought-provoking, empowering, any other nice adjectives, not the bad ones. And thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you again. Please like and subscribe.